So this is the continuation meeting of our January 5th meeting of the North Bennington Graded School Prudential Committee. And I'm Ray Molyneux. I'm the chair of the board. And Kieran McNamara, who's a member of the board, is here. Mary Rogers, who's our treasurer, is here. Kim Kroll is here, who's a member of our board. Matt Patterson, who's the vice chair of the board, is here. Tim Newbold, the head of school of the village school, is here. Renee Gordon, the operations and financial chief of the SVSU, and Nick Galt, the director of HR at the SU, and Cat TV, and Lori Elwell, our clerk, is here. So open the meeting. I don't see anybody who would make public comments, or is there? What is that hand down there?
That's just the mouse.
Okay.
There's nobody that I'm aware of.
All right,
Public, no one in the waiting room.
All right. So last week we dealt with our financial and our consent agenda and the warnings of some policies with minor tweaks to them for the SU. And we had a report from the superintendent and then a presentation from Renee Gordon on our budget. So I think we should jump right to it if Renee has something to present. I believe she sent us all a revised presentation based on the assessment changes, but it may not have final, certainly wouldn't have final numbers on the state on yields and on perhaps not final yields on equalized pupil counts and so forth. So if you're available and have something to say, Renee, please speak up. Thank you.
Sure. So the draft, thanks, Nick, for allowing me to share.
Of course.
So hopefully you can see my screen now. It's
Yep.
actually slide things over a little bit and make it even bigger so you don't have to see all of our count codes. So we have a forecasted or projected increase in fund balance for next year. These are preliminary numbers, but as Ray has indicated in the past, it's really based on our financials that we provide to our auditors. So, they'll be confirming these numbers for us. And last year, if you recall, we had a prepayment that was impacting what the auditors were telling us we had available for fund balance, but we went ahead knowing that it was just going to reverse itself in FY22. So that'll be kind of flushed out when we get our FY21 audits. So that's the increase that you're seeing in that line there in terms of revenue. And then your general state support grant is essentially the demand or our ask from the state education fund. And this is just a function of essentially the expenditure budget. We take that and then we subtract any offsetting revenues that we have here. And this makes up the difference and helps us to generate the income needed to sustain for next fiscal year. So moving into the expenditures, the highlighted numbers here are simply just reminders for myself and Alice in my office of key points of where the assessment numbers lie. So we did go ahead and update these figures based on the SVSU meeting. Was it last week or the week before?
last week,
really
yes.
losing track of my days already.
Yeah.
So based on the outcome of that meeting, there have been some shifts. So we did go ahead and update the numbers here. I haven't changed any other numbers, kind of waiting for some feedback on student counts and projections as to where we think students might be attending next year. Announced tuition is due, I think by statute, by January 15th. So I did, not that it impacts you so much here, but I did receive one from BRSU today. So, I mean, they are trickling in, but because they're tied to, all school district budgets, it kind of piles on top of one another. Like you have to have one before you do the other. So I anticipate they'll be continuing to trickle in. So I think we took the numbers from what we had noted in last year's, probably a combination of what I have here of either last year's forecast of what we were thinking and or if I had information in our e-finance system as to current student enrollment at the various schools, I went ahead and plugged those numbers in here and have them in the notes so you can see there. I think we're probably over somewhat in your student counts, but I don't know that for sure. Ray, you probably know off the top of your head, who's where, and if we do have some numbers to correct there. And at the first pass, I simply just took what the current tuition rates were and bumped them up 3.5% just as a starting point.
Okay. So may I ask a question on these items now? So
absolutely.
does the 17 students for SVUESD reflect graduations of certain students or what?
I didn't actually dig that far to see what the grade levels
Okay.
were. I was just operating off of what we had in there presently.
So I need to review that and look at their grade levels.
Mhm.
Okay. The one for Highland Hall, I've put an inquiry to them and to Southshire for numbers that they expect. But
Okay.
these are the current numbers, 7 and 11, I believe.
Okay.
Yep. And the village school was last year's budget number.
Yes.
The single student at Long Trail, of course, is a 6th grader. So that student will disappear into secondary land next year. And we don't know about, I have to check the grade levels on Grace Christian. I think all of those kids are not, none of them are graduating at the end of this year exactly. Sacred Heart, not Grace. Grace, the 2 children who were at Grace left at the end of December. So I'm assuming that we should allow for them because I suspect there will be students to take their place from our district going to Grace next year. And so that sort of rounds out my rough take on what's up there on the board. And I think we're still a ways from settling on this because we need to talk to Tim, the village school number, and I think I need to canvass Sacred Heart and Grace about their numbers and wait for Southshire and Highland Hall to give me feedback if they have any. And the SVUESD numbers, I'll have to look into grade levels. Okay, great. And the rest of these items are basically the same. The sinking fund is the same, property insurance is the same. The question I had, which I sent to Renee this morning, is down in the special services. What's the 752? And last year, of course, we had 18,000 really. That was our budget for our share of special ed costs for students in our district in the K-6 area range of grades. So could, I'm sure you can explain to us, the change that's going on here, Renee, and I appreciate it if you would.
Sure. So as it stands right now, Act 173 goes into effect July 1 of 2022. This is a shift from the model that we've seen for the past several years of how the state has funded special education. And it's shifting from more of an expenditure model to a student-based census model. So Brad James with the Agency of Education built a tool that he sent out to all business managers late in the fall to give us an idea as to what we should be calculating for offsetting revenue since this is going into effect for July 1. The difference is with it being census-based and not tied to expenses, it's an average of the most recent 3 years of ADM. And as such, North Bennington's portion is significantly higher than what it has been with the previous model. So what you're seeing here for the special education or special services assessment is the net of what the expenses are for North Bennington District at the SU level, with the fund balance left over from FY21, and then including the new census-based model revenue. So yes, it did go from 117,000 for this year down to 752. And just rumor has been circulating that the legislature is considering, or will be considering in the session that just started, a possible delay in implementation of Act 173 funding. We have no data to actually generate what our offsetting revenue would be if it were postponed. The agency has given us the best information they have based on what the current law is. So that's how we've built the budget. I don't want to venture really a guess, but I mean, if it went back the other way, we'd probably be looking at something closer to what your current assessment is for this fiscal year, right? Okay. So they are, I believe that the VSA reached out today. Legislature, I believe, is getting ready to take testimony from superintendents as to whether or not they support or do not support a delay. And I spoke briefly with Superintendent Colquhoun earlier today, and I feel very strongly that the delay should not happen because it's law, and the only information we have to go by is the law. And for them to change it after the fact, we have to have our budgets warned by the end of the month. So if a change were to come about, it would be too late for us to do anything about it. So hopefully we'll be able to, inform our legislators of that and, that potential impact. And as you could see, I mean, if it does go back to the current model, it's a pretty significant swing for the budget here.
Yep.
But there's no change to the funding for the special education portion for early ed. So that would not be impacted. That remains the same. So we did get that data from the agency, and it remains the same way that it was before. Triple E is not part of Act 173. And then, yeah, so this line here you can see is the net effect of one of the items that the SVSU board voted to approve, a shift in how we're assessing the special education costs for the early childhood program. And we'll, until further notice, unless there's something that happens down the road, will be based on the 2-year average ADM of students that are identified in Triple E. So with just zeroing out, so this is a slight change, kind of rolling as you're kind of going through the numbers. I pulled the one student out for Long Trail, and that gives you a, whoops, sorry, we'll jump there. Overall net increase, again, without changing any of the other numbers, which I think we probably are a little high, maybe on some of them, increase of 111 or a 3.71% increase in the budget, which then translates to your state support grant increase of a 3.54%. Ray, I don't know if there's anything else you want me to go through here, or if you want me to jump over onto the tax impact page. Pause before doing so.
Yeah, I think for the moment, the Long Trail student could just be a placeholder. I'd just leave it there until I have a better handle on other numbers in that bunch of numbers of students. Because I think it may get used somewhere else, is what I'm thinking. But it's nice to see what it does, that impact there. And I really appreciate your explanation of the special education funding, because I was looking at that 742 and I was wondering, what is this?
It's a really positive swing for the district.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Where did that money end up in the budget if it was taken out of that line? I'm just trying to.
It's not in the budget.
Yeah, so Matt, what's happening is the North Bennington School District's going to see a greater influx of revenue from the state to support special education.
Right.
So really to the tune of, an extra $100,000 as to, what you typically wouldn't be seeing in the past. So
that's part of the state. That's part of the state grant.
Yes, that is the census.
That's where that money is.
Yep.
But we didn't save that money, obviously.
Nope, it's just a reduction in your local budget.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. And that money is totally in the SU's hands, right? All of that global budget money.
Right. The money comes into the SU, yes, and is applied directly to the expenses. Essentially what happens is, we haven't actually seen how it's going to work on the new model yet. Typically what we would end up submitting reports incrementally through the year based on what our actual expenditures were. But I haven't seen, I'm assuming they're going to stay on the same schedule for payment and just be making incremental payments based on what that the census-based block grant ended up being.
Okay. Now, Kate Abbott had sent me an email, which I assume she copied you on a month ago about, roughly, saying I needed to be aware of these special ed expenses that were going to occur from students entering the program, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They're currently in the pre-K area and they're entering kindergarten or something. I can't remember the specific cases, unfortunately. And I don't have my computer with me because I couldn't stop and pick it up. So, but those are all taken into account, which I figured they would be because you're doing the global budget for the SU for these special ed costs.
That is
Right.
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is a number that if they stick with the law is going to be what is in our budget for special ed expenses plus the special ed administration.
Correct. Yes.
Correct. Okay.
And
So,
I mean,
are-
I think the only thing we would be able to do at this point, because we only have, what, 2 weeks left before, our warnings have to be posted, is that we go with this. And then if they end up changing the legislation and shifting back, to the model that we're currently in, we're not going to have an opportunity to make any adjustments to the budget. So we'd end up, unfortunately, probably having to go into a deficit situation unless, depending upon where the actual expenditures lie. I don't know. It's really unsettling that they could make a change like this without, doing it in a timely manner.
I
we did.
agree with you. And the burden lies on you, basically, at that point to figure things out.
Yeah.
And because basically, although it's our expense, we have virtually no say in it.
Mhm.
It's basically the special ed department that deals with it, and that would be Kate's ballpark. Yeah. All right. So at this point, without settling on the numbers of students, we can't finalize this budget, and maybe we can't finalize it for other reasons as well, which would be the next section you were going to talk about, which is the calculations for overall numbers, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Please proceed.
Okay. Okay, screen share back up. So on the second tab, or probably would have been the last page of the PDF that I sent out, at the top of the screen, I have entered in the equalized pupil figures that we received from the Agency of Education, and I have North Bennington highlighted. The reason I have them all here every year is because of North Bennington being part of the Union High School District. So we have to factor everything in to come up with the proportion. So that's why you're seeing everybody else there. So with the equalized people for the elementary district and for the high school district, we use those proportions to calculate our blended tax rate. This information for MAU, at the time I sent it out to the board members, it had not been presented to MAU. We did do that last week. And although there was quite a bit of discussion about it, I think that they finally landed at the end of the meeting that they were comfortable with that budget. So this is what it's looking like for them and how that's going to factor in. But then if we look over at the North Bennington side, so North Bennington and then Shaftesbury ID, everything is going to mirror until we get down to the CLA numbers. So one item to note here, actually a couple items. So last year we were a little bit concerned about that excess spending threshold. At this point, we're not near there, so I don't anticipate that we'll be having to worry so much about that unless there's some really unforeseen influx of students that we just aren't on our radar yet. This number here, as we talk about every year, is a figure that's presented to us from the tax commissioner in their December 1st letter with their recommendation. So this year, they gave us two scenarios. One with the projected surplus in the state's education fund of nearly $90 million. If the legislature were to vote to use that full $90 million to continue to support the ed fund and leave that money there, the recommendation that this number would be 13,846, which is incredibly, high as, compared to what we've seen, going back a few years. We were 8,000, 9,000, knocking on the door of 10,000, but to be almost near $14,000 is quite a bit. And what this means is that if we were educating our students, or essentially it's your education spending per equalized pupil, if it was $12,937, our base tax rate would be $1. But right now we're calculating out to just over $19,000. So we divide by that number, which gives us the base homestead tax rate. From that point, we then apply the proportions of equalized pupils from up above. So in North Bennington, 40.79% of the equalized pupils are at the secondary level. So we apply that to their base rate to come up with a portion of MAU. And then we do the same thing for North Bennington. 59.21% of the students in North Bennington are at the elementary level. So that number gets applied to this rate, and we come down to 87 cents. And adding the two together, the equalized rate then becomes 1.3491. And again, these are just estimates, because this number here, the legislature won't set until later on in the spring, when they have a better understanding as to what they're going to do with that projected surplus. I guess I jumped ahead a little bit. So they were saying if they applied the full $90 million, they were suggesting that the 13,846. I erred on the side of being conservative and went with the option or scenario that they provided us, that if they did not use that full surplus, scenario B suggested that property yield, or the tax commissioner's recommendation, would then be the 12,937. So that is the number that I've used to run these calculations.
So Renee,
Yep.
that means that the 90 some million, if you already took into account the wise assumption that they will not use it all for education, so you've already built in a little bit of a buffer there. Is that what?
Yeah, this number still kind of
Oh, it's high. It's very high.
Yeah. I've never seen it so high before, so it's uncharted territory for me in this role. So I was really surprised when I saw the numbers, but I have to rely on the data that I'm given from the state, and this is, I guess, kind of, I don't want to say a worst case scenario, because goodness only knows what can happen with the legislature by the time they vote on it. But
so what if, can you plug in a different number there, and can you put in 11? And that's how much difference?
It's huge. 21-cent increase, 15-cent increase. But right now, if that was the number, the other factor that we hadn't talked about yet is the common level of appraisal, which these numbers have across the board, at least for all of the municipalities here within the SU, have decreased significantly.
They're in the zone where they have to do a reassessment, right?
Yeah, we're getting close. As soon as it gets to 80, they have to do that. But over a 10% decrease for the Shasberry ID district, and just over 8% for North Bennington. And these numbers are fixed, so these numbers will not change. So when we apply the common level of appraisal to that equalized homestead rate, A number below 100% means that our grand list isn't high enough to actually generate the income that we need to support the education funding. So you can see you jump from the 1.34 up to the 1.5779 and 1.4152. If you were over 100%, that means the properties in that municipality are over on the grand list. They're over what market rate would be. So your grand list is going to be generating more income. So then it would actually it would have the reverse effect, and you would see your equalized rate actually drop if this again was over 100%. So be that as it may, they are below 100, so it's going to push our tax rates up. But comparatively to where they were for this past tax year, will be a decrease. Again, at this point, with all the estimated figures, nothing's really set in stone, with the exception of the CLA, really. I do anticipate that non-Anthony will be taking action on the budget figures that I have there now on, I believe their meeting's on the 19th. And so they'll be voting on that then. So that side of the equation will be locked in. So that's where the current budget, again, with the updated assessments, that's where it looks like things might land. But again, just with some variations that are out of our control, and mainly that would be the property yield number there. So I'm happy to answer any questions if I could. I know this isn't, some of you have been through this numerous times, so it's probably old hat, but somewhat complicated and convoluted. It's not an easy tax system.
Well, I would suspect that the, well, I don't know, but with the pressure on pension stuff and related to educators, that they're gonna feel compelled to take some of that money out of that surplus.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're lobbying. Yeah, if the NEA would be lobbying to use some of those funds to help sustain.
But I guess the bottom line is that we're looking at a significant reduction as it stands now from last year. So maybe worst case scenario is level from last year.
Yeah, anything's possible, right? I mean, I'm kind of on the edge of my seat, wondering what's going to happen with Act 173. We wouldn't see that impact though until we're budgeting, in subsequent years. If we, ended up spending and not having enough revenue or fund balance to offset that, we'll have to make that up down the road, which will have an impact then. But
right.
Yeah, I think things look pretty favorable right now. But it is, it's just, it's an odd system, right? Because all these things we estimate, and even the equalized pupils, usually we've seen several versions of equalized pupils by now. And still to date, we've only received one. Brad has been talking about them doing another data pull, because I know that some districts looked at their numbers and thought they were low, but we haven't received any revised numbers to date. So it's the best information I can give you at this point.
When is the drop dead date for this to be?
The last date that the warning can be posted to stay within statute is going to be January 30th, which I think is a Saturday or Sunday. So really would probably be looking at Friday the 28th.
Yeah, I think that's, well, yeah, Saturday or Sunday. So I have a question, which is just basically information, not really about our budget per se, but just to fill in a lack of knowledge in my mind about this, about the equalized pupil construction. So the numbers for poverty and so forth, who generates those numbers? And is it here at the SU? Is it the state that pulls that number together from hard data that's provided to the state by?
Yes,
These-
it is from the state.
Okay.
I was able, and maybe you didn't have a chance to see it, but I think we asked this of Brad. I don't know, I was able to do a search in my email, and he had quoted the statute for us, but he said the data comes from the Department of Children and Families.
Right.
So it's not based on free and reduced numbers. So they're
Right.
pulling that data from that state agency. So essentially, any student that is receiving nutrition benefits would then be classified as poverty, so that, or living in poverty, so that weighting factor would be applied to their count in the ADM.
And we do have the right to see what those numbers are, which are they're in the chart that you sent out for the current hold numbers.
Yep, I just see it, my computer.
I remember looking at it last year, so I assume that they're there, and that's.
And if you think my spreadsheets are complicated, wait until you see Brad.
Yeah.
At least his are very colorful.
That's a green and yellow. And red, maybe.
So we have to scroll down to our SE org number 05. So these are all of the towns within the SU here that I have highlighted. I know these numbers are incredibly small, and I can zoom in a bit, but if by doing that, we're going to lose view of some of the columns.
Renee, you're still sharing your other spreadsheet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Try that again. There it is.
There we go. Secondary weighting, poverty students. 385. LEP
Yep.
students, we don't. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is your portion of Mount Anthony down here, and then this would be the graded school district on this line up above.
Right.
The yellow shading is indicative of the towns that are part of a union district. So you can see he has Mount Anthony here with no data, because all the data is being generated by the towns above.
So this chart was in last week's, Renee sent it out last week, so it was all of you should have that chart in that emailing, I think, because I think it was to the whole board, so. I think what I need to do is check what the list that Jim, I won't know anything about the weighting factor for poverty. That, as Renee said, that comes from the state. But I should check to see if the unweighted 80, there's an ADM number, right? Yes.
Yep,
One
your
cent.
2-year average, yep, and that
Yeah,
has the
That's the
data
2-year
behind
average, yeah.
that on these other tabs as well.
And
everything
I
else-
can get to those tabs from what you sent out, or those? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I sent you the
Okay.
Excel
Yep.
file. Yep, so just a matter of clicking through that.
yeah, it just seems to me I ought to verify that our number's correct. I have no reason to doubt it, but just in case, we've had issues in the past where somebody got dropped, so that's why I think I ought to verify it, just as part of my duties as a board chair, I suppose. But I really have no reason to doubt this because it shows a pretty large increase from last year. At the, as I recall, I think we were at about 148 on, if you look at line 69 across. Last year, that was about 148 something, wasn't
These numbers drop out of my head as soon as budget season.
it? Yeah, no, I don't expect you to know that.
But I can certainly go back and look.
I don't really expect you to know that. I should look it up, and it's on a chart from last year. So,
Yes, it would be.
that's a substantial increase, but you look at our costs, they show substantial increases too. So we're benefiting from the 173 Act impact if it goes forward this year, and from the increased numbers, but at the same time we have increased numbers of students to pay for. And, there's also the yield, which is helping us. So I don't think we're making a final decision on this budget tonight. But I think, everybody, Renee's given a very good account of how it's put together. And hopefully by next week, the 19th, we will be able to settle the budget. One of the items that's crucial to that is talking with Tim Newbold about the village schools finances for next year through their budget. And unless there are further questions on what Renee's presented, I would say we could move forward with that so that Tim doesn't have to be here all night with us.
Yep.
Thank you, Renee, very
Renee,
much.
thank you so much. I mean, that really is very helpful to get, I mean, you're in a hard situation because you're at the mercy of so many other ridiculous things. And we see it every year, but this will all come together, and I really appreciate your help with where we're at, and hopefully we're in the ballpark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing that I did want to mention, though, I think it's the board's intent to continue again next Wednesday. We're going to have a conflict, though, because MAU is meeting, I believe, at 6 o'clock in that space.
In
So we
the
can't
space
have-
I'm in right now.
Yeah. So we won't
Okay.
be able to have both
Right.
meetings going on at the same time. So I don't know if we can look to.
Well.
That
we
is their,
could-
that is their regular meeting night, so.
That's their regular meeting night, okay.
Right.
And what time do they meet exactly? What's their,
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, and they go to, how long do you think that'll go? 8 o'clock?
I haven't seen a draft of the agenda yet to know what they're going to be trying to tackle that night. I mean, it could be a
Yeah.
pretty quick meeting, but again, they're going to be having their budget discussion that night too, so I don't know.
Yes. So I guess our option really is to put our meeting forward earlier in the day. Because our meeting will be a shorter meeting, hopefully an hour or less, but and so we'll talk about doing that. Maybe we should just talk about it now and get it over with so that it's settled. If they're at 6 o'clock, we'd have to be at 4 o'clock or 4:30, and we'd have to make sure we get done by 5:30 or 5:45. Is that a possibility for the other 3 members of the board?
It'd be probably rough for me. Normally Wednesdays, well, I sometimes have Wednesdays off, but because of the holiday next week, I probably would still be at work. But it could still work for me. Just trying to figure out access to Wi-Fi.
I unfortunately will not be available then.
Right,
That's,
okay,
I mean, if you want to, I have to pick my daughter up from skiing.
yeah.
So could we
Could we
think about
move
the
the
next
date?
night? Yeah, next
All
night,
right,
Thursday.
later at night? Or could we move the date of the day of the week?
Right. Yes.
We could put it on the 20th, which is the first day that we could actually warn. In post a warning, we could warn it on the 19th, we just won't post it yet. I'm pretty sure we can warn it on the 19th and post later, so.
I did confirm that with legal, actually during a meeting we had with her yesterday, that, yeah, it's the 30 to 40 day window is for posting. I've asked Amanda to draft the warnings, and I don't know if she's reached out to Lori yet, just to confirm, that we make sure that we've got the right identification of, the vacant seats that might be coming up.
I did talk to her at length, and we have all of the information except the financial information for her to put in. So we're ready to roll.
And I guess the other thing too is that I believe the governor's considering allowing the annual meetings to be remote this year, again, because of the continuation of the pandemic. So it escapes me how we did this last year, if we actually had the link generated at the time we did the warning, or if we followed up with the postcards that go out and just kind of blasting it out to the public that, once the link is established, it's there for folks to be able to join.
Lori's got intel on that.
So I have a lot of information on that if you want to stick around, and if you would like me to talk about that now, Ray.
Yep.
Okay,
Fine.
so I had a meeting this afternoon with Will Senning from the Secretary of State's office and JP Isabel. And so I have a lot of information, and I'll try not to get mixed up with the Village of North Bennington and the North Bennington Graded School District. Matthew, I've spoken to about this already. So here's what we're going to do. So we are going to hold a Zoom meeting on February 26th at 9 a.m. That'll be the North Bennington Graded School District's informational meeting. We did have it on the postcards, Renee, but I also put it in an insert in the ballots that I mailed. The ballots this year are going to be mailed again because of the circumstances of the Village of North Bennington and their municipal spaces. We must mail our ballots again. And so I will put a note in there, and then I'll also put the note will also say where they can access the link. And what we did is we had them go to the SVSU website and find North Bennington, and they found the link there to access that meeting, is how we did it last year. So, so we're having the Zoom meeting. Ray, there can't be an open space as well. So for example, you don't need to go find a space to be at to have it
Okay,
for people to come who want to be in person. It is Zoom, period.
Zoom alone.
So it's in my best interest to have the ballot, and I understand we need to wait for things. I need to have the warning so I can order my ballots, so I can get them back, so I can stuff and mail,
Right.
3,000 envelopes and et cetera. What else did he tell me, Matthew? We cannot, so even though I have all these restrictions this year, they have no funding to help us out. Because that was for COVID, but I guess this isn't, I don't know.
This isn't for COVID?
Well, that was my argument, but I didn't win this one.
Okay.
But I did do something else. Last night, we had a meeting, the Village of North Bennington Board of Trustees had a meeting, and I kind of knew this was how it was going to go today. And the Village of North Bennington, through their ARPA funding, has offered to pay for our expenses for the North Bennington Graded School District and mailing the ballots. And the labor for that, the stamps for that. And I think that was very generous of them to do so. And I really thank them very much for that.
I agree with you. That's very generous of them.
The envelopes. So I ordered 3,000 envelopes today. Because you have to have the inserts, and they let me know that we have to pay for envelopes. There's a new, because of the cost of paper, all municipalities have to pay for the envelopes now. So it's a huge cost. So I'm even more thankful to the Village of North Bennington for helping us out. And I think that's all we talked about, but it was a couple of hours. I just got off the phone before our meeting.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so whatever the costs are, just keep track of those. And then they already agreed, the state said it was totally fine for us to use the ARPA funding for this kind of thing. And just submit the bills to Mary and
Yeah. And so, Kim, thank you for looking at possible sites for an open meeting, but that won't need to happen for the school, but it would, I'm going to look into some of those sites for the village because we have some extenuating circumstances there. That we
Right,
have
and I just was, Lori and I were discussing this morning, and I just wanted to publicly thank the Park McCullough House and Chris Oldham, who's running the Park McCullough House right now. They were exceedingly gracious and willing to help the community out in whatever way they could. So, yeah, I just wanted to thank them.
And we're hoping that they might still offer us that opportunity from the village stand.
And I'm sure that they would, and I can continue that conversation with him, or you can start a new one. How, just let me know if I can help.
Thank you. I think I will. I think I'll text you the date that the village is in a different situation than the school.
Certainly, yeah.
And so we have to have the open meeting, or we have to plan a ballot. It's just not going to work that way for us. And our spaces are way too small. So,
Right.
and anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim, for talking to Chris. And I think I should send him a thank you directly. So maybe if you, I'm not sure if I have his email address, but I'll find it.
I can do that to you.
And that's really great. And thank you, Lori, for your hours on the phone today and other times as well. I appreciate
Yes.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lori.
Good to know that.
So we've got a good understanding then, right? The ballots are going to go out, provided we can actually get this information that we need to put on the ballots
Right,
as early as possible.
right.
And then I think what Lori, excuse me, what left out was that she's still going to have to staff
Oh, right.
the depot
Or,
that day for people who want to drop off or who have lost or claim they did not receive said ballot.
yeah,
And so that'll be another part of it, but that's how that'll
yeah.
work out.
I will say that I'd be willing to help with that staffing if necessary, but she has her normal sources for persons that just back in November for the MAU vote, that was not available. So I sat in and I enjoyed my time. So I'm available if you need help. So, and perhaps maybe you take me up on that for doing envelope stuffing. I suppose. Okay.
I think you'd be good at licking all those envelopes.
I don't think so. Probably need a little help for that, like a sponge or something, whatever you use.
Tape.
Tape.
Okay. So that's where that stands at the moment. And budget is where it is at the moment. And I would like to have Tim talk to us. And, Renee, if you wish to depart because you have other work to do, you can go. Thank
I
you
do
very
have
much.
other work to do.
Yeah, I know you do. Okay. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Renee.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. And unfortunately, you can't make me the host, so I can't because I don't have a computer. So
Yeah. and
I guess you're gonna
gotta
have
lock
to
up the
hang out,
building.
but you're doing your own work right now. So.
I'll stay busy, no worries.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the next item here is to have a conversation with Tim or listen to Tim about what he's got to say about the school and operations next year. Thank you, Tim.
No, absolutely. I'm happy to be here. I guess if you have specific questions, please chime in. Overall, we are still chugging along in what has felt like the longest year ever. Which, surprising that last year I would have thought that, but this year seems more trying in many ways. But I am happy to report we have some good things going on in that right before the winter break, we brought a new person onto staff through a grant through the Eanes fund and the governor's education is a federally supported grant through the governor and the state. And it allowed us to hire a reading specialist who she has now working part-time with us, and we're excited to have her on board. I think that'll be a great addition to our team for this year. And through some additional grants from our community, we were able to add another role, which will hopefully support us in the next few weeks and months ahead, and hopefully not into next year, but we'll have to see how things play out. But we hired a COVID specialist to help us out as well, and we're happy to have that person on board to help counsel us and basically relieve some of the work from the core office staff around everything COVID related. It has been quite a drain this year with all the changing pieces. And I'm not going to put them on the spot, but it's somebody we all know and care about. So there we go. The next thing is, where are we as far as the budget for next year? I think the numbers that Renee had there are probably well within what we're going to do. I have my board meeting next week. I'll present numbers to them, and then I'll have my typical meeting with you guys to finalize our number. But I think the number that Renee has there is probably well within what we are thinking is going to work for us. We have had some shifts in numbers of students. We did have, so we're down a couple of students from where we were. But we've also had an influx of students. So these things always are variable. So we'll see where we settle out before the February count. But we're at about 109 right now. So we came down a few from the start of the year. And looking ahead to next year, we're probably going to be looking at a number similar to that, maybe a little bit higher. And we'll sort of see where that all settles out as we move forward. The things that are top of our list right now are still COVID related. The changes that the CDC and the Vermont Department of Health have brought about are definitely causing some shifts in sort of our protocols and guidelines within the school. We've come up with what we feel like are a pretty good plan going forward. We're going to share that with families. The big shift is in the quarantine periods, which drops from the 7 to 14 days to 5 to 10 days. So that's a big change in things. The other piece is really upping our game as far as getting families involved with the Test to Stay program. That is still going to be available to us as an independent school in the weeks to come, and we want to get as many people signed up as possible because it is, we believe, inevitable that we will have additional COVID outbreaks in the coming weeks because the numbers are through the roof. So we luckily, coming out of the winter break, I don't know how exactly, but we did not have any positive cases in our surveillance testing, which is, close to 100 kids last week, and this week it's over 100 people. But we do anticipate we may get some this week and may have to make some adjustments to classes and things like that. We're hoping that the new state program that they're shifting to, which allows us to give antigen tests to families to take home, will be available to independent schools sooner rather than later. We feel like that could be a real game changer in sort of our overall response and approach to COVID. And what that allows the families to do is, if there is an exposure at school or outside of school, they can give their school-age child the antigen tests that day, the morning of, and figure out whether they are going to be eligible to come to school. And it would really, it's shifting the burden a little bit from the school to families. But we feel like, given the numbers, it could overwhelm the school pretty quickly. But the families may be able to make that happen. So we're hoping that we can be a part of that. That news just was shared out in a preliminary email last Friday. It was supported in the governor's press conference yesterday, that they're moving forward with this program. The big thing will just be whether the tests are available, and how much they can get them out and how quickly they can get them out. We're happy to report also that the Test for Tots program is supposed to be up and running later this week. We're hoping to pick up our tests tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
And then if that goes well, then we will be able to give those antigen tests to our pre-K students in case we have any close contacts there. And again, the families would administer them for their pre-K students. So this gives us another layer of protection as far as being in school. But I do anticipate some closures or some cases in the next couple of weeks. And some of you may be following closely the announcements from our local medical experts, like Trey Dobson and things like that. But the numbers are significantly high, and the positivity rate is over 12% in our area, sometimes climbing as much as 15%, but they think it may go over potentially 20% or more in the weeks ahead. So that invariably means that many of our community members will be positive. So it's going to impact the school. But thankfully, the impact, the illness for most of those folks getting the Omicron variant is much, much less. So we're hopeful about that as well. Those are sort of the big things on our plates right now. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have, but as always, I have to give a huge thank you to the folks that I work with. I think we have been lucky in many ways about how things have gone for our school, but I also think it has to do with the team of folks at the village school, which include all the teachers, the teaching assistants, the staff in the office have been incredible in keeping the school running as well as it's been. So can I answer any questions that folks may have?
Yeah, the test to stay program, is that a weekly thing or is that like once a week? Or
That's
then
so that's a response to a positive case. So if
Okay.
we get a positive case in the school, we would then be able to do the test to stay program for the kids involved in that class. So they would then be taking the antigen test. We would be administering that as they come into school. We'd get an answer in 15 minutes. And if they are negative, they can stay in school. If they're positive, they're going to have to head home. So it's got some challenges. There's no doubt about it. I mean, a family may have to come back and get their child, a few minutes after they've dropped them off, but it allows more kids to be in school for longer periods of time. And that's really the hope. And if from what we have gathered from folks is that if the kids are testing negative with the antigen testing, the likelihood of them actually shedding virus is pretty low. So that's the hope that those folks are not, they may have been exposed, but they're not carrying it and delivering it to others. So that would be available to all the students who are not fully vaccinated. So if they're fully vaccinated, and as long as they don't have any symptoms, if we're in the test to stay program, they can actually come to school. But if they experience any symptoms, they would have to quarantine. Does that make sense?
It does. So it's more of a reactive kind of situation then.
It is, and we've been doing the surveillance testing, but the problem that may go away in the next couple of weeks. We'll have to see. We did it today, but the challenge there is Omicron is so virulent and so fast in spreading that the delay in getting the test results back from the PCR testing, which is the surveillance testing, we do it today and we won't get the results until tomorrow night, really.
Yeah.
So that then gives us 2 days of exposure, and a lot of people could get sick. So the antigen test, although not as accurate as the PCR test, the quicker response is much better in this particular instance. There'd be other instances where it may not be, but in this case, it appears to be the better way to go because Omicron is just so transmissible.
Sounds good. Thank you for everything you're doing.
No, we're just trying to keep it as safe and healthy as possible, and keep the kids smiling, and we're getting there. We're getting there.
I can tell you, I do apologize. I felt like I was breaking the law when I went up to the office the other day.
No, it's quite all right. We had special circumstances. You needed to get some things figured out.
It just felt really, really weird since it's been.
It's been a weird year not having people in, which is I think one of the things that made our community so special. Is it was sort of, we really embraced the open door policy of having everybody and encouraging families to be in the school as much as possible, and not being able to do that is tough.
Yeah, that's a really frustrating element of this.
Yes,
And,
indeed.
I will be happy to see it go. If we can get it to be gone. I admire your fortitude, Tim, and your positive attitude in the face of all the things that you have to deal with. Quite amazing. And we thank you for it.
There's days where it may not be as positive. But we're getting there.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be human if there weren't.
Yep.
But well, I certainly appreciate what you're doing for this community and the children under your care and the
Thank you.
staff who work for you.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
it's mostly
So,
all about them.
And from what you said, we'll be talking later about your budget and you
Mhm.
need to meet with your board. So
Yes.
I presume that will be next week then.
Yes.
Uh, Remind me, Lori, what did we decide on for next week? What day?
We decided on Thursday.
Thursday at 6:30?
Yes.
Okay, right. All right.
So I would not be able to attend that because I
You
would be
not
at the other
able to
meeting.
attend that.
Right.
So
So let,
what would you be able to attend or? Because
If it was a little, if it was a little later, if it's 6:30, I can be there late, but I wouldn't be able to be there right away.
Oh, would 7 work for you?
Even 6:45, but 7 would probably be better. Yes.
Okay, so let's set it for 7. If my board is able to make that, Matt, Kiernan, and Kim.
Yeah, it looks good.
That should be fine for me.
So
Yes, I
that's,
can.
7 o'clock, Thursday, the 20th.
right. Thank you for that clarification.
so Ray, you'll get a hold of Amy?
Amy,
So, yeah, so she'll need to set up the Zoom link from Amy Goslin.
Right.
okay, yeah, Amy at here at the STU. Yes, I
Yeah.
will. I
Right,
will.
okay, great.
Actually, I think Nick will do it for me, but
What'll I do?
Oh, I can't see Nick very well back
never
there.
mind.
I'm hiding back here.
I'll do it. I'll send an email to Amy about when our continuation meeting will be for next week. All right, thank you. Well, if there's nothing else at this moment, I don't think there's anything else, then I'd ask for an adjournment. Actually, a continuation motion to.
I'll make a motion to continue the meeting till next Thursday, January 20,
At 7 o'clock.
At 7 p.m.
7 o'clock.
Yep, I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So it is.